Right. Let's get this show on the road today. Just waiting for my other stream to start broadcasting here, guys. So give me just a hot minute. Yeah, hopefully it will go. Oh, maybe it won't. Alright, let's do this, guys. Welcome in once again. My name is Steve Pintado. I am the host of the Fantasy Coaches Podcast. Also, I'm a great member of Unwrapped Sports Network that's helped me be able to do these sportscaster and live streams. I'm also live on YouTube and Twitter right now. So if you're watching me, I'm watching you in many different spots right now. So just bear with me if I have to answer any questions. I welcome anybody in. So if you haven't know what I've been doing the last 3 or 4 days now, I'm in day 4 now. I've been just basically giving everyone about 15 to 20 minute quick breakdown on everyone's fantasy value, who's fantasy relevant, and who may not be, who may be eventually, and kind of what their draft value is and outlook for the season. It's real quick takes, nothing too crazy in depth, but I just like to get out as much information I can in a 15-20 minute window to make it easier for you guys listening at home or wherever you may be, just to get a quick fantasy take on, every single team basically. So today I'm talking about the 49ers. And the 49ers, they had a magical season last year, and, it all talked about, there's many things to talk about, and we're going to start with the quarterbacks today. As I always do, start with the quarterbacks. And of course, we all know who the 49ers quarterback is. It's Jimmy Garoppolo, Jimmy G, finally able to play 16-game season for us. A lot of effort coming into this guy, and overall solid season. Finished QB 14 on the season, and he had 5 games over 20 plus fantasy points. And when you look in a little bit deeper, those are basically our QB1 performances, by the way, because he only had 5 QB1 performances. So let's see who he versed. They have those top tier performances. He versed the Cincinnati Bengals. He versed the Cardinals, who couldn't stop anybody all season long in the air. So there are 3 teams right there that weren't really good. He played New Orleans in a shootout. That was just a crazy what-else game. Hey, Mikey, what's going on? Me too. I love fantasy football. And he played the Green Bay Packers one game. Hey, Brad Sports, what's going on? Mumbo G. Thanks for joining. Appreciate it. And basically with Jimmy G is that, his top performances were against really bad situations. Either the pass defenses were bad or they were involved in shootouts sometimes. And you saw that from Jimmy G not being a consistent quarterback in terms of fantasy. And that's what I'm kind of talking about when it comes to Jimmy G right now, is that I don't really trust him to be a full-time in a 1-quarterback league to be my starting quarterback. I just don't like what he's able to do overall. Yes, he showed great work in 2018. He said, wow, he did some really good stuff. But I just don't see that same guy right now. I don't know why. Maybe it's the year after his injuries, everything. He needs some time to grow still. Hopefully that's the case. But right now, from what I saw this past season, I don't like what I'm seeing him as a stable fantasy quarterback right now. And, his 3,900 yards last year, 1,800 of them were air yards, which means 2,100 of those were made after the catch from the wide receiver. Hey, iHoops FL, thanks for joining. That basically means that a lot of Jimmy G's production, kind of like we talked about Ryan Tannehill a couple of days ago, that it came off the back of his, receivers and tight ends and running backs. He didn't really do that himself as much. And that's what something that concerns me next year, is that if Jimmy G is able to do the same thing again, he just has to hope that his wide receivers, which he has talented yards after the catch wide receivers, to continue to do that. And that's my big thing. I don't want to rely on Jimmy G to have his skill players be relied on as well. I'd rather work with a quarterback who knows how to air the ball downfield and get those big yards on his own terms instead of having it be on his wide receiver terms. That's why they drafted Brandon Ayuk, kind of another yards after the catch kind of guy, to help him out with that as well. In terms of the offense the last couple seasons, and that's something else that kind of concerns me. They were 29th and 30th in passing plays. So they're a big run first team. We obviously know Kyle Shanahan is a big run first kind of guy, and Jimmy G's kind of just the stable quarterback who kind of just sits there and does what he has to do to get the job done. And in terms of 2020, like, again, you lost Deebo Samuels right now. We'll talk about him in a little bit, but he could be out for a while. And that's something that could be scaring as well. And this is a really strong defense with a strong run game. I expect them to continue that effort they showed last year. They have one of the top tier defenses, play defense, run the ball. They have Jerry McKinnon back as well. That should help as well with obviously Jimmy G. Overall, he's a better QB2 in a Superflex league, but in a QB1 league isn't someone I'm looking to draft. Again, if you want to take a shot on him, again, late in draft, 14, 15, 16, again, but I'm not really thrilled with him. He doesn't have a rushing floor either, so that doesn't help as well. He's 62 rushing yards in the season. If we could see a glimpse of what we saw from 2018 when Jimmy G was putting up big numbers, I'm just not seeing it on a consistent basis for 2020. And that's something that scares me, to have him be an actual QB1 in a lot of scenarios. So Jimmy G for me is not someone I'm really high on, but better in a 2 QB league if you're looking for more than super flex value. Going to the running backs, there's a whole bunch of running backs in this team, and at some point, all of them could be somewhat relevant on the season here. And that's something that's a bit scary, you could say. Jeff Wilson, someone who just got put onto the COVID list, someone who consistently puts up like 2 or 3 games of like RB1 production each of the last 2 seasons now. It's when someone gets hurt and they ask Jeff Wilson to come in for 1-2 games and put up numbers. He puts up 14, 15 carries and gets a touchdown. And that's something, again, if Tevin Coleman, if Mostert or McKinnon go down at some point, or 2 of them at least, look to pick up Jeff Wilson in those certain weeks. In terms of this season, no, I'm not really looking to draft him right now, obviously, unless it was a really deep league. JaMycal Hasty, a little bit of a smaller guy coming out of college, profiles of a third down back, at 25 receptions in 3 straight seasons in college, has the ability to make it in the NFL, the route runner, with fantastic hands. I don't know how much his role will be used if he even makes the team with Jared McKinnon. That's the big thing. If Jared McKinnon doesn't play, JaMycal Hasty is someone you might want to look into in those deeper PPR leagues, because he could show some PPR value. Obviously, like Tevin Coleman and most of them aren't really profiled as big PPR, reception guys. So Michael Hasty isn't a guy to worry about right now, but if something happens to McKinnon and they need that passing value guy, look for him in your waivers. There's another guy, Savad Ahmed, more of a bulkier back, someone who could make a big splash if given the opportunity, so keep your eyes on him. A lot of these guys I mentioned are more better dynasty stashes right now to see what happens. Hey, thanks, appreciate it. Thank you, Brad. Thank you so much. Not a problem. On the football team. Not a problem. I got you. Anytime, any questions you got, I'll help you out with. And then we go to the big 3. And these probably the only 3 you're worried about drafting. Jared McKinnon may not be the most draftable guy right now on the board. And, he's got a tremendous talent, especially in his passing game value. That's kind of one of the reasons why they signed him, because he just fits in this Kyle Shanahan offense. Again, he hasn't played in 2 seasons now, and who knows how much he's going to actually play with this 3-headed monster possibly, or 2-headed with a little headed being Jared McKinnon. But in terms of, 12 and 10 man leagues, probably not really draftable, really. But in terms of maybe 14, 16, you're looking at a guy with PPR upside in an offense who favors running backs and will continue to favor running backs. So I appreciate the follow, Brad. Thank you so much. One question. Which 3 teams have the best D-line? Oh, man. I'd say the 49ers are pretty up there. I'd probably give them one of the better defensive lines in the game. Really like the Chargers D-line as well. Oh, man. Let me just think a look here. Who would be the last one I would want to go with here? I mean, Denver's supposed a pretty good D-line, honestly. They have Brad Chubb and Von Miller. I'd probably rate those that 3. I feel like I'm forgetting someone off the top of my head, but I know those 3 have tremendous edge rushers, pretty good defensive tackles overall, to kind of keep them stable in versus the run game and in the passing game as well. So, thanks for the question. AC Gal, 2293, thanks for joining in. But let me keep going back with the running backs now. Next, we're going over to Tevin Coleman. Tevin Coleman came over from Atlanta after having his relationship with Kyle Shanahan in Atlanta. And he started off pretty hot. I mean, early on in the season, he got hurt a little bit, but he was top 25 running back the first half of the season. I mean, looked pretty solid. He was tearing it up. I mean, he had that one game he had like 3 touchdowns, and it was a killer game for him. But then eventually, later in the season, I believe it was week 11, he had a injury that lost his starting job and just didn't look the same. Mostert kind of took over at that point and started just destroying fantasy leagues for people and just putting up big numbers. Unfortunately, Coleman, I think he's more of that complementary to what Mostert does, both here, and can do more between the tackles than Mostert can. So when you're looking at Tevin Coleman, you're looking at an RB4 probably right now in fantasy with upside, to be an RB2 right now in fantasy. What's up, Brad? What do you have here? The football team, yeah, I would say they could probably consider 3. I'd say next year you could consider the Washington football team a top, probably 3 team with Chase Young. I like Montez Sweat a lot. Great edge guy there. I think the Washington football team is going to have a bright future on defense, especially with Ron Rivera, running the helm at, defense as the head coach and probably handling many of the defensive play calls. So couldn't agree more with you on that. Going over to Raheem Mostert now. Tevin Coleman, I'm sorry, I didn't finish him up. I apologize. He is to be profiled probably as more of a double-digit round guy that you go for. I said RB4 on your team with the upside. If Mostert gets hurt, Coleman could be the lead guy, seeing the big workload. I wouldn't want to take him as my 3, and basically I just want to avoid this backfield in general. I just don't like what they're doing there because it's just too many mouths they're feeding, and someone will break out at some point, but we don't know who. And it could be Coleman at some point. That's why he comes in there with an RB4. RB3 is a little too risky for me overall. Going into the running backs now, not running backs, I'm sorry, going into Raheem Mostert now. We all know what happened to Raheem Mostert. I mean, just a tear at the end of the season. I mean, from week 12 to week 16, he averaged dominant fantasy points, had the 6th most breakaway runs at 15 yards or more, saw 4.5 yards per opportunity, which was incredible. I mean, he just dominated, all season long. After week 11, though. Before week 11, there are some issues. I mean, he was RB47 the first 11 games of the season. There were definitely issues. Thanks for the whistle there. Appreciate that. That is my biggest thing with Mostert is that he hasn't shown on a consistent basis for a whole season. Yes, kind of like what Damian Williams did a couple of years ago. End of the season playoff run. We all know he dominated the Green Bay Packers last year. But I want to see Mostert do it for 16 games, and that's something that concerns me because he hasn't done it yet in his career. He's been in the league for a while now. It's not like he's a rookie or a second-year guy. He's been in the league for a while. And when it comes to Raheem Mostert in that note, it's something that's kind of scaring me right now is wanting to draft him as that RB3 right now because it's like a boom-bust guy at RB3 right now, which wouldn't be bad if you get like 2 studs. If you go get like McCaffrey or if you go get like maybe back into the first round, you go get Josh Jacobs and Nick Chubb, and you go get Mostert as your 3rd guy, okay, not horrible, but he comes with a risk reward because if he continues to do what he did last year, he's going to be a stud. If he doesn't, though, and then you're just wasting that 3rd pick. And that's kind of why I see him better fit as a round 8, round 9 guy. He may go earlier, but 10 touchdowns last year, that's sure to come down. He's not going to score 10 touchdowns again. His just was way too inefficient for my likes last year in terms of fantasy. So I'm kind of just down on, unfortunately, Raheem Mostert as well. Going to the next play here, wide receivers. Trent Taylor, definitely an unknown secret for those deeper man leagues. Trent Taylor was a slot guy who was ready to make a kind of a step after a bad sophomore year, and Kyle Shanahan has been talking him up all preseason, and even last preseason, the coaches were like, this kid can play. And he has again. He had a bad sophomore year, had a really impressive rookie season with 400 yards and 2 touchdowns. I expect him to be a sneaky possibility if Deebo Samuel happened to be out for a couple games, to be honest. I really like what he's able to do because he could play a really important role in this offense and kind of be that safety net for Jimmy G outside of, George Kittle. But again, you're not going to draft him until you see otherwise. I want to see it. If you want to draft him, I believe, the first few weeks of the season and see what happens. Maybe draft him after week 1, I believe. I think he plays the Jets week 2 or the Dolphins week 3. He could show tremendous value out of nowhere that people aren't talking about right now. So I just want to mention him right now. Keep your eye on him if he ends up doing something impressive. Kendrick Bourne, someone who seems to be the guy who would kind of step up if Deebo Samuel goes out. I mean, he was kind of productive last year, 45 targets. He had 5 touchdowns on 30 catches. It's basically a touchdown every 6 catches. So he could show some kind of worth early on in the season if you give him the opportunity to do so. Again, probably better in a deeper man league. I'm not really trusting this 49ers team as a whole in terms of fantasy. There's very few people I really want because there's just a lot of mouths and a lot of unknowns at these positions. So Kendrick Bourne, while he might have some touchdown upside, again, another guy who I really want to draft overall. But definitely keep your eye on a guy like this as well, because one of these guys has to step up with Deebo Samuel's being counted. Jalen Hurd, another guy. Fantastic story this guy had. Real quick, guy out of Tennessee, was an RB. Hey, Jets man, thanks for joining. Jalen Hurd was a Tennessee running back. He didn't want to play running back. He knew that, hey, I need to be a receiver if I want to live in this NFL for much longer. Coach wouldn't let him do it. Transfers out. He was a top tier running back too. He was ranked high at one point on the running back, going into the NFL scouts. And he switched to wide receiver, had 900 yards his first season, had a, injury plagued rookie seasons. And I think he could have a real shot as well. Again, it's not people I want to draft. I mean, I like his talent. He's got potential. It's just that if you want to take a round 16 on a guy like Jalen Hurd, at least, I wouldn't be mad at you. But they're better, deeper man league, guys to step up and be wide receiver 3s or 4s for you during the season. But just right now, I'm not really, seeing a big uptake in these guys I just talked about. They're just more like, hey, one of these guys could break out if something happens. And that's kind of why I kind of like them right now in terms of fantasy, is that you want to wait to see if one of these guys, keep these guys tagged on your guys' waiver wires, because he could end up breaking out at some point. Then Dante Pettis, we all know that Dante Pettis last year, doghouse, top round 6 pick after a crazy 2018 season. Shit the bed in 2019, 100 yards and 2 touchdowns. Yeah, I'm not really high on him whatsoever. I don't see him coming back from this. There's just too many mouths and honestly better talent around this team now than it was 2 years ago. So I don't really see him kind of making that break to come back into fantasy relevance right now. Brandon Ayuk, the rookie first-round pick, which is a big head-scratcher for me last year because I did not expect him to take a guy like Brandon Ayuk right now, but it kind of fits what they're trying to do. If you see what Jimmy G was really good at, is the yards after the catch. Brandon Ayuk, Arizona State guy, big play, athletic wide receiver. Many had him wanting him to switch positions to defensive back. He has, his route running and his hand skills a little inconsistent, but he's a game changer. And can do things with the ball in his hand, and especially after the catch, hence why they kind of drafted a guy like this. Can be a very vertical receiver. The only thing is, again, he doesn't really, don't throw them in contested areas. He struggles to kind of bring those down. He's a little bit skinnier, scrawnier wide receiver. Maybe he hopefully bulked up a little bit. And, the 1 year of production was the year after N'Keal Harry left. I mean, he was there with N'Keal Harry back in the day, and they played together. And he was nowhere near productive when N'Keal Harry was on that field. It only was until after he became the number one man when he saw real production in college. So that's something to look at too. Overall, seeing what N'Keal Harry happened to him in his first year. So again, he has a good shot because Deebo is out, so he could still let Deebo roll. He kind of do a lot of different things, but he's definitely a draftable player. This guy is the one draftable 49ers wide receiver I'd want to draft just because. Thank you for the popcorn, I appreciate it. And it's in the late round too. Don't go get him in round 10 or 11, going to get Ruggs or Jefferson or Lamb or anyone like that. He's a later round guy still because you can't trust him to really do all the great work. I mean, no offseason really. No, that chemistry with Jimmy G is probably not there to that extent yet. Definitely a little late round guy could end up being a pretty decent play this season. So for Ayuk. And then we go to Deebo Samuel. So we're running the time here. Deebo Samuel, a strong second half of 2019 season. And he showed some flashes, 8 games, really didn't turn anything up until Emmanuel Sanders came in. In week 10 and week 16, he had just one game under 10 fantasy points. Kyle Shanahan found ways to get creative to get him the ball in his hand. He had 3 rushing touchdowns from a wide receiver. That's insane. I mean, he was just used everywhere on the field. He has to deal with, obviously, George Kittle being the main guy, but obviously we know the big injury that happened during the preseason here. Not preseason, but the offseason. And that kind of puts him out, I think it was 9 to 12 weeks, which puts him around week 1. We'll find out very soon if he's going to play. If he's on the pump, his value is definitely going to be dropping down. If that happens, he's around 10, 11 guy when you go in your IR spot. Even if you want to take him a little earlier and take that risk, go for it. But he's a guy who's, if he's not on the pump week 1, he's probably going to be limited for a couple of weeks and then get back into it. And the best I see him is a wide receiver 2 at best this year. I don't see him really breaking out and being that wide receiver 1. I don't know how many more targets he's going to get after 81. He might get closer to 100 this season, but 3 reception touchdowns isn't the best overall. I would want to see a little bit more. They're not really, they're running the ball more in the red zone than they're all throwing it, which is a concern. So he may not have that touchdown upside in that note unless he gets those rushing touchdowns. Again, he's our wide receiver 2 in my books. I don't see the upside past that right now. I don't see him jumping to an RB1 spot. That's kind of why some people in Dynasty right now, a lot of Dynasties are super high on him. I just don't see him being ever a true wide receiver 1. Being a really good 2. Just never being a wide receiver 1 in my eyes. And that's what you should look at this year. If he's not on the pump, he's more around 7, 8 guy right now. And if he's on the pump, 10, 11 right now, that's kind of why I see him being the most productive. And then the last tight ends real quick, because I'm over 20 minutes. Obviously, Jordan Reed just signed. I don't see him taking in too many of George Kittle's opportunity. George Kittle might come down a little bit. I'll mention that in a second. Jordan Reed probably doesn't have enough value unless they do a lot more 2 tight end sets. If that's the case, he could then be valuable. Just that he has those concussion concerns. If he gets like one more concussion, he's going to kick the bucket at that point. So he's a bit of a concern on that note. Again, not a draftable guy, but just want to mention him a little bit to you guys, just so you're aware of, he's on the 49ers now, and just be worried. What do I want to say here? Just be open to that. Maybe he could see some value this season as well. And then last but not least, George Kittle. Obviously, we know just George Kittle is a beast of a tight end, and probably come time next year will be the tight end 1 in terms of fantasy. Coming off back-to-back 1,000-yard, 5 touchdown seasons. Again, he took a little bit of a dip after that crazy 2019 season, 2018 season, but he's a solid tight end, and 10 games over at least 8 fantasy points. Many of those were 15-plus games. He had 9 tight end 1 performances, even with the uneven play set of Jimmy G, who I don't like that much. And then it was weird. The thing is weird is he had some of his best games with T.J. Barrett and Nick Mullins. But again, that team was a completely different team. And the thing is, I don't see them having a big passing volume once again to make George Kittle see those 2018 numbers. You could see another similar season that he's going to see this year, but don't expect him to kind of go over the top unless maybe like Deebo Samuels is happening to be out the first 6 games, then his value rise. I think he's a round 3 pick. People picking him in round 2, I just don't see that being that big of an advantage. I think he's a round 3 guy. You have to take him in round 3, round 2. I think is asking too much too early because there's going to be games where he just doesn't perform to that kind of high standard as much as he can. I mean, that's my biggest thing is that like this team may not be in necessarily the mode to throw the ball as much or want to throw the ball like, Travis Kelce is in Kansas City. There's a run first team with George Kittle being the number 1 pass catcher. So George Kittle, again, strong tight end 2 right now in terms of overall fantasy tight ends. Round 3 guy. If you take the tight end route early, you won't be mad because he's going to put consistent numbers. I don't think you should take him in round 2 because I just don't see him going to be putting up massive numbers that he did in 2018. So, George Kittle, fantastic tight end overall. But that is my 49ers take, guys. Sorry I went a little over. I keep going over the over minutes here, but I just want to give you a little take about every single player, a little bit about what they're able to do on the field here. Hope you guys do enjoy this as much as I enjoy talking about it. So tune in tomorrow night, or probably around the same time, 8, 9:30. We're doing the Pittsburgh Steelers and the return of Big Ben. So look into that, see if you like it. If you do, come back with questions tomorrow. I can answer any questions I can possibly show you guys. So thank you guys for listening. Tune in until next time. Have a great one now, guys.